Hello, everybody. This is the Loose Leaf Media Podcast, or as we like to call it, Letterblaxed. Welcome back for another episode. My name is Davis Leaf. I'm here with my co-host,
Romanus Hutchins.
And today we are going to be doing a little bit of a retrospective on the Planet of the Apes franchise, leading into a little bit of a discussion of the new one, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which we just saw last night. And from what I've gathered, we both thought it was pretty terrific.
Yeah, it was nice to see the movie theater packed on, 2 days before it officially comes out in theaters. Mm-hmm. I think it's maybe besides Dune 2, the first time I've been in a movie theater in a long time and feel like the theater was packed a lot.
There was a good amount of people there for sure.
A lot more excitement because I didn't watch any of these movies before we started to prepare for the podcast episode a week ago because I just was not interested in watching CGI monkeys.
Kind of blows your mind how good it actually is, doesn't it?
Yeah, like I've quickly become a fan in the last 4 days.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great. Welcome.
Not obsessed yet, but we're getting there.
Give it time. I mean, the franchise is long from done with itself, and after 10 films and a very incongruent franchise where not everything is that interconnected, a lot of different voices taking over different films, a lot of different performers. It's definitely a very unique franchise in terms of the directions that it's gone and the takes on it, I would say.
Yeah, because I think a book called Planet of the Apes was written in 1963, and then the first movie came out in 1968.
Yes. They worked fast.
They work fast. There's a ton of movies out on this.
So, going back to the original 1968 film, which I rewatched last night after we had saw Kingdom because I had that ape fever.
Oh, and the simian flu.
The simian flu.
At the simian flu.
Yeah, watching the original movie, they were referencing that so much, and I was like, man, the connections in the reboot franchise have been so airtight in terms of the way that it respects the original source material of the 1968 film and pays tribute to it pretty consistently. Mm-hmm. But one thing that I completely forgot about the original film is that it was written by Rod Serling, or rather co-written, the creator and narrator of The Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
And that made perfect sense to me. Mm-hmm. I was watching this movie and I'm like, oh yeah, this kind of is a large episode of The Twilight Zone, isn't it? It's very existential. It's almost surreal at times, and I owe a lot of that to the prosthetics that were in that film, which were actually pretty terrific in that movie as well. Mm-hmm.
For the time,
right. Absolutely. And when I think about, I can't tell if they were doing a lot of ADR for the vocal effects because the mouths weren't moving perfectly in those prosthetics, but everybody's voice was so clear and fluid, so whatever they were doing there, it's just in terms of the vocal effects, was very impressive in that film. And just the general populace of all of the apes in that film, everybody, just the makeup effects and the prosthetics, it all looked fantastic for 1968 and still does to this very day.
Yeah, the movie, if we're talking about just pushing the cutting edge in science fiction cinema, at least for the Western world, Planet of the Apes definitely is in that Star Wars,
I would say so.
Right. It just...
Look at the way that it's persisted after all of this time.
Yeah.
People still like the Planet of the Apes movies.
The cultural references.
Exactly. And I feel like the reverence that people have for Planet of the Apes now is better than the reverence that people have for Star Wars now, Oh,
yeah. There's better Planet of the Apes movies now, as far as like numbers, as far as Star Wars movies. The Star Wars movies just don't touch these movies.
I wouldn't even say there's much of a negative conversation revolving around Planet of the Apes at all.
Sure, yeah.
Like, most people that are on board with this franchise have nothing but pretty good things to say. I mean, I can, like, as somebody that has only seen the original 1968 film, the Tim Burton remake from the early 2000s, and all of the reboot films. I didn't watch any of the 4 sequels to the original movie from the 1970s. But I can say that there's like not a lot of negativity, I would say, about this franchise. I mean, there's definitely some shortcomings in terms of the films that I've seen, specifically the Tim Burton movie. But even that has a little bit of a charm of its own. Like, it's somebody that hasn't watched that movie in years. I think back on it and I'm like, I mean, it's really not horrible.
It has an excellent performance by Mark Wahlberg, and we get to see Michael Clark Duncan in a monkey suit. It's
So you recently rewatched? You recently rewatched that Tim Burton one, right?
To be fair, I watched it on the treadmill at the gym. And because it's been coming on FX a lot, because I guess for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes,
they're promoting the franchise a little bit.
Yeah, that movie. Well, okay, I will say the Tim Burton movie probably isn't as good to me because it just doesn't feel like that. It doesn't attack the Apes movies that I like. It's not all about the science fiction. The science fiction sort of in the background, where the main story is based on the conflict of humans versus apes and the questions that brings up. The sort of the overconfidence of humans to try to engineer themselves out of life's problems.
That's a good way to put it.
Right, in the first movie, Charlton Heston's character is a guy who really is unimpressed with.
He's a cynic.
He's very cynical.
He's a cynic.
He's very cynical.
I love that, and I love that the way they characterize him in that first movie is that he's just so detached from humanity, where his intergalactic companions are feeling very out of their depth when they come upon this new world.
Right.
And he's just sitting there like, well, I don't feel any sort of way about leaving everything behind because there was nothing that I felt like we were leaving behind in the first place. Everything was so self-detrimental and collapsing in on itself. And now that's, we've escaped the society that ultimately needed to crumble for itself, we have the opportunity to create something new, which is not where the movie goes exactly. And for anybody that hasn't seen the original Planet of the Apes, it's got probably one of the most impactful twist endings that any film in cinema has ever had, and it's like on par with the Empire Strikes Back's twist. And for anybody that hasn't seen it, I'm not going to specify what it is because you should watch it, but when I was rewatching it, as somebody that did already know what it was just from watching it in the past, but already having known what the twist was, even when I watched it for my first time, it seems kind of obvious what the ending of this movie is going to be, but at the same time I'm watching it and I'm like, that's not the point.
No.
Because it reveals what's actually what is happening at the very end, and then it just cuts to black so abruptly.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, that's not only a very Rod Sterling thing to do in terms of his storytelling and writing, but it emphasizes the point that it's really about the inner conflict of humanity and how it contrasts with this new civilization that's being engaged with in terms of the apes. And I really like that. I really like the existentialism of it, because it's pure science fiction.
Yeah.
It's like there's some dramatic elements, but there's like no action whatsoever in the original. It's just pure science fiction.
Right.
And I think it's one of the greatest example of how it's science fiction, the stories that science fiction intend to tell in its purest form. It's very much like an episode of The Twilight Zone or an episode of Star Trek, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good segue to go into the reboot series, which is much more grounded in reality than the first,
the first 5 movies.
Absolutely.
Which, to reiterate, I never saw any of the follow-ups to the original one.
I've seen Conquest, but
okay.
I mean,
there's Planet of the Apes, then there's Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
I've seen Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Then there's Escape from the Planet of the Apes, which I've seen parts of. Then there's Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. Then it ends with Battle of the Planet of the Apes, and I have no idea where the story really goes after the first one.
Well, I mean, I could. You know what? Maybe just go see these movies if you're interested. But I will just say that Beneath the Planet of the Apes just did not do it for me.
Yeah, it kind of seems like for most people. I mean, the intrigue for the franchise dropped off pretty quickly after the original.
Yeah.
Like, people mostly talk about that one exclusively from that era of Planet of the Apes movies, and for good reason. I mean, I don't know anything about the follow-ups, and maybe that's kind of a sign.
Sure.
Knowing that I already knew what the big finale of the original was, because it made such an impact and was so influential throughout cinema going forward.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what any of the other ones are about. So,
well then, so we get to Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which, when did it come out?
2011.
2011. Okay, that was when I just decided, I'm probably not going to see that.
I wasn't interested in
Right?
it when it was first coming out either.
Yeah.
But my love for the franchise really hadn't taken off until Dawn came out, to be totally honest, in 2014. And then it gave me a whole new perspective on what this is and what this can be.
What I do appreciate about Rise is that they do take their time to really tell the story of the main protagonist, which is a chimpanzee called Caesar. And not just that, but it does show the hubris of man. And the main character. Why am I forgetting the actor's name?
The main human actor.
Not Malcolm.
No, Malcolm's in the
Malcolm's
second one.
and Don.
The main human actor in Rise is played by James Franco.
James Franco. Yeah. Why do I? Where is James Franco?
Well, I mean,
wow! I just remembered.
Yeah,
everything.
you were like, you know why? You know where he is.
I legit forgot. How did James Franco just completely get erased from my memory? Whoa. Okay.
I think he just kind of ultimately, after the allegations started coming out against him, people just started erasing him from their memory naturally, and because he hasn't really done anything.
He is not
since then, and I don't know if he will anytime soon. But
maybe,
that's not the point.
Maybe Pineapple Express too. Who knows?
Well, they did that in This Is the End.
Oh no! Fair. No. Damn.
Which was probably the last great thing that I ever saw James Franco in, but I just love that movie in general.
Well, to Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Anyway, it
just so James Franco's character is trying to find the cure for Alzheimer's because his father is Alzheimer's, and
it's a really compelling story. Actually,
it's very compelling, but they're testing this, these possible candidates for a cure on primates, these chimpanzees, and it ultimately leads to the simian virus that does improve the intelligence of apes to the point where they can, communicate through sign language or even audibly speak.
But it just ultimately throughout the duration of the series, it just increases the degradation of human intelligence in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
It's complicated, but that's ultimately the effect it seems to have.
But to be honest with you, that's sort of in the background to Caesar's story, the chimpanzee that
because he's
James
the main
Franco's
character.
He's the main character. He eventually becomes the king of the apes.
Almost the Messiah, essentially.
Yeah.
Like when we get to Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, he's seen as this messianic figure, essentially, in terms of ape history.
Right. Then I guess we get to Dawn.
Yeah, then we get to Dawn, which ultimately did revolutionize what this franchise can be, I think.
You think so?
Oh, 100%. They brought in Matt Reeves, who is now known, now has such a bigger name in Hollywood after he directed the Batman. But at the time, he just had such a distinct and dark, grounded vision. And Rise of the Planet of the Apes already kind of reinvented what this franchise can be, and it is a great movie too. There are moments in that movie that will always stick with me. Just the spoiler, but the moment where Caesar speaks for this first time is just one of the coolest scenes I've ever seen in a movie. It's so shocking and so well timed. And you'll never forget that moment. But then you get to Dawn, and just the opening of that movie is so dramatic, where it's just showcasing the downfall of humanity, leading them into this post-apocalyptic world based on a global pandemic that happened from our own creation as humans. And cut to the present in this movie, and humanity is basically at its last stand, while the apes are just beginning to flourish and creating their own societies and communities within themselves. And then it just begins to start a conversation of, while the apes believe in keeping themselves unified, there are deviants existing within the apes communities that don't believe in everything that Caesar is trying to teach them. And that ultimately leads to the apes becoming their own enemies in a lot of ways too, which is also just another commentary on like human evolution ultimately, and independent thought, and how we have these large deity-like figures who are preaching all of these tenets and ideologies that we are supposed to be following, and then one person, the Judas, comes in and says, actually, I don't believe that, but it's ultimately for very personal reasons. It's very emotionally driven reasons, which is why these movies are also so compelling in that way, is because there's such a strong humanity that you see in these apes that only progresses over more and more over each movie.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. One of the things that you see, the first things that you see in Dawn, is the two rules that Caesar has for his kingdom. Ape not kill ape.
Ape not kill ape.
And apes stronger together, right?
Apes together strong.
Apes together strong. Wow, you have it down pat. And so I like that in Dawn, those two rules are questioned. You know, like Caesar has to question his distrust of humans and his trust of apes.
Absolutely.
And that's what I'm talking about, where it feels like the science fiction in these movies is not the best part of these movies. It really is the drama to me.
Yeah, the drama and the social commentaries that are woven into the story.
Yeah,
I agree. I think Dawn really does reinvent everything about this franchise in terms of how grounded and dark it really can be, and a lot of that just perfectly culminates in the third act. And I think just beyond that point, I think Matt Reeves' technical elements of this movie are just so beyond anything.
Yeah.
From like since the first movie, to the point where it's like, man, this is one of them ones. This movie is like one of those like instant sequels that's just better than the first. Not in terms of like the very first Planet of the Apes, but in terms of this reboot franchise. It's like, it's just so glaringly apparent to me that Dawn is such a better movie than Rise, and Rise is already a really, really good movie.
Right.
And it just improves upon anything. I mean, we had mentioned the other day about like the tank scene with the rotating camera around the tank, which is like, anybody that's seen this movie knows that will always probably remember that shot, because it's just so impressive and so intense, so well structured, so well executed, and that's just a perfect testament to the vision that Matt Reeves had. And I think that really, really carries over and just improves upon itself even more so in War for the Planet of the Apes.
Oh, well, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic action movie.
It is.
Right? The first two, like the first one's definitely an origin story. The second one does feel more dramatic.
It's a post-apocalyptic dystopian film ultimately.
Yeah, and War for the Planet of the Apes is appropriately a war movie.
It's a war drama, like through and through. There's some amazing action set pieces in that movie, but it's just like, it's very slow and it's very somber from like start to finish, and a lot of it, and like it's also kind of a revenge film.
Absolutely.
Like, not gonna spoil why, but it, like, a lot of it is about, you know, the nuances and the legitimacies of like why somebody seeks vengeance for themselves and why somebody can't let go of this sense of vengeance. And it's a really, really, really good character arc for Caesar in this movie.
And it really is, because through the first two movies you see tons of times where Caesar tries to choose the peaceful path and the crossroad as often as possible when he absolutely can.
Yeah.
And even the peacekeeper in him is tested in War for the Planet of the Apes.
Constantly.
The first 3 movies are great for seeing Caesar's progression as a leader of the apes. The first one. No, these definitely. I'm glad that you convinced me to watch these movies. Yeah. They're very fantastic.
They've been very underrated, I feel like, for a long time. Where like there's a select few people that went and saw them when they came out, and they made a good amount of money. But I feel like the cultural impact of these particular Planet of the Apes films have not really been in anybody's eye line. People have overlooked these for quite a while, and I think they are slower. They're not like your traditional action science fiction movies. There's a lot of action in all of them, this reboot franchise particularly, but I don't really think that's the point of any of these movies, because like you said, like it's really cutting to the center of what it means to be human and how that contrasts with just evolution in general. And War of the Planet of the Apes, I think, is the best example of that, just because there is such a strong, like, this is where we really start to see the degradation of humanity, because there are actual biological effects that are really taking place just beyond death that this virus is having on people. And it's also such a perfect segue into the plot points in the original Planet of the Apes.
Absolutely.
And this reboot franchise is full of nuances in terms of the story it's the story it's setting up for the original Planet of the Apes from 1968, but it just takes its time, and it doesn't just jump right into it right away. And War, it has my favorite villain in this series. I think
after last night.
With time will tell, but
okay,
at this moment, I would say the Colonel, Woody Harrelson's character in that movie, is just so despicably evil, but such an interesting character at the same time. And they slowly build him up, and they do the same thing with the villain in Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes too, where it's a very slow build up to the reveal of the villain.
Absolutely.
Where you for half the movie, you already sense the impact that this villainous figure is creating.
Yes.
And then there's just that one moment where we finally get to see them for their first time, and it's so satisfying. And subsequently, there's so many great scenes with that villainous character, and I speak specifically for War and Kingdom of the Apes. But in War, also, I just think the cinematography is my favorite in that one, too. There's so many great shots in that movie. I love the scene with Luca talking not talking to, but exchanging with Nova in that movie. And you just see Nova
put the
flower right on Luca, and his black coat contrasting all the white snow around him with that pink flower in the corner of his ear is just such a beautiful image. And when you consider this, like, it's all CGI too, it's just like, what? This is revolutionary stuff.
You're absolutely right. We talked about this last night, but some of the CGI, especially with the main protagonists in these movies, there does feel like an uncanny valley. But some of the other apes, like the orangutans and the gorillas, they've mastered CGI.
Purely
gorillas,
lifelike.
It looks like a gorilla.
Yeah. I like, specifically for this new one, Kingdom, I saw a comment online about how this is like some of the best true to life visual effects and CGI that we've seen since the second Avatar movie. And I actually think I agree with that statement.
Yeah.
Like, watching Kingdom last night, I'm just sitting here mesmerized how mind-blowing these special effects and visual effects are in this movie.
Yeah, Wes Ball talked about how Wes Ball, the director of Kingdom, he talked about how he was influenced by the CGI from The Way of the Water.
That does not surprise me even this way. So should we just segue into this new one?
And I actually have a summary of the movie. In a world where apes have formed individual clans, Noah, a young chimpanzee, embarks on a journey of self-discovery and redemption. That's the story of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Davis, what did you think of the movie?
I was already very excited for this movie, and it still did manage to exceed my expectations, because it's like the last movie, it's very slow moving. I didn't think that there was a lot of action towards it. It was such a character drama.
Yes.
And I thought this had the best world building out of any Planet of the Apes movie. The sheer scale and world of this movie is outstanding. The cinematography is incredible in this movie. And the visual effects are better than I've ever seen in this series. And I honestly, I had mentioned this to you recently too. I think the protagonist of Noah was better than Caesar from the last 3 movies. I don't know why, but there was a degree of relatability that I got from Noah that I found more interesting. And I found that, as you just described, his story of redemption felt a little bit more compelling than the last 3 movies, where I thought I was just kind of like watching Caesar in the last 3 movies. I thought I was with Noah in this movie.
Yeah.
I thought I was standing beside him as he goes on this adventure to, gain back what he had lost. And he was just, it was like, it was an odyssey. It honestly just kind of felt like an odyssey. It was a real character journey of this kid who was going through this hero's journey, essentially. And no spoilers, but it culminates perfectly, and there are so many great payoffs by the 3rd act that it's really just hard not to feel satisfied and feel the sense of this being one complete story. And I just thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said. Even this morning when I was writing my notes after we saw the movie last night, it felt like watching A New Hope again. The first Star Wars movie. It just, just seeing this character that's very relatable, young, and sort of
has ambition,
but sort of definitely feels like they're at the beginning of their journey. Doesn't really, maybe know where they're at, their current standing in the universe.
Noah, where they're at.
Oh no! Wow, look at you, Jesus
I
Christ!
couldn't help it.
Yeah, I know.
We'll cut that. It's okay.
No, keep that in. We're keeping that in.
All right, we're keeping that in.
Thank you. Anyway, so why am I yelling in the microphone like you're not the one that edits this?
I don't know.
Yeah, whatever.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I'm not an expert. Just don't make it hard for me.
Okay, sure. Anyway.
Well, moving on.
So, I don't know where I was.
Noah.
Noah is super relatable. He starts off with his friends, and I think the thing about Caesar,
who are also great characters, great supporting performances by those characters as well.
Right. When in the previous movie, Caesar, like you said, is sort of a messiah. He's trying to be the king. He basically starts out as the king of the Planet of the Apes. Noah is just the son of a village elder in his ape clan, the eagle clan.
Yes,
the eagle clan, right? Just a ton of apes that train eagles in their free time. I'm very downplaying it, but eagles play an important
there's a
role.
lot more. There's a lot more to it, but it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. Yeah. I mean, without spoilers,
it's
right?
pretty cool though. It's pretty cool,
right? And I think we've all felt in the shoes of Noah, where you sort of feel like you want to perform to as best as you can. You want to,
you want to prove yourself.
You want to prove yourself. You want to exceed the expectations of your parents.
Absolutely.
You want to make everybody proud. You want to, do as best as you can.
And even his relationships he has with his parents are very you feel that sense of pressure because of who he is and who his parents are, but at the same time it's like the interactions he has with his parents feel so real too.
Yeah.
I just love seeing every single moment that he exchanges with his father and his mother, and that extends to his his friends and what would become his mentor, Raka, the orangutan in this movie. Yeah,
and I should say that, well, without getting into spoilers, you see the progression from this character at the beginning to the end, and you believe it. You believe that this character has gone through transgressions, and he's learned from his mistakes, and he's unlearned some things that he's been taught in order to save his clan, save his family and friends. And man, it just is a great story of self-discovery.
It is self-discovery. That is a good way to put it. I was just blown away by this movie. The visuals, the performances, and I guess we can talk about Proxima Caesar a little bit
because and I asked you, like, are you sure that in War Woody Harrelson's your favorite?
Now that we're gonna talk about him, he's pretty goddamn good in this movie.
Proxima Caesar, holy shit! By the way, we should say that Kingdom takes place 300 years after.
Yes, it does.
War for the Planet of the Apes,
which is like the biggest lapse in time between films in this reboot series.
Yeah,
there's like it's only like a few years in between, at most, in between the other three movies.
At
but
most,
this is
like
like
10
it's
years.
it's like generations later at this point. And I just want to like Kevin Durand, who some people might know from movies like Legion,
X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Yeah, he was Blob.
Yeah, he was Blob.
310 to Yuma, he was in that too.
He sure was in 310 to Yuma.
He was, yeah. He was the guy that kept hazing Russell Crowe in that movie. Yeah. He's been one of the most underappreciated character actors for quite some time, honestly.
The thing that I'm sad about is that he does give a great performance, but because it's voice acting, I feel like he's not going to get as much love.
It's voice acting, but it's motion capture too.
Yeah, but he's a chimpanzee. It's just you don't get as much credit, you know?
That's true, but I guess that is true. Andy Serkis had to go through a lot of motion capture performances before people started to realize that's the same guy that's playing Gollum and King Kong and Caesar.
Yeah.
I'm just like, and now people know his face, and he's actually a very well accomplished film director too. Mm-hmm. And but in the case of going back to Proxima Caesar, so when I saw Dune 2 this year, I was like, Austin Butler's performance as Fade Rotha is going to be one of those villains that you remember in history, and I still believe that. But I almost I think this is going to be a good year for villains, villains in movies, because we got Chris Hemsworth in a couple weeks in Furiosa playing the villain, and that's good. I think he looks great in that movie.
Yeah.
But in this Proxima Caesar, Kevin Durand's performance, again, the build-up and anticipation to the reveal of his character is so great. And then when he's revealed, the reveal is satisfying.
Right.
And we get a good amount of time with him to understand who he is, to understand his points of view, and why he does what he does.
Yeah.
And he's it's a little bit fanatical, his approaches and his methods.
Sure.
But that's also kind of the commentary of the story, because this does feel like the most biblically driven Planet of the Apes movie.
Oh, it definitely is.
You got a protagonist
named
called Noah, for God's sake.
There's even more, and we'll talk about that in spoilers.
Yeah,
but, no, I agree with you. And we talked about, the original Caesar's 2 rules, you know. And 300 years later, because there's really no written history in this, ape civilization.
Yep.
It's really hard to keep the original teachings of Caesar and propagate the spirit of those teachings through their culture.
Absolutely.
And so now you have a leader like Proximus, who is using the same words as Caesar, but has completely perverted the message to the point where he's an oppressive dictator. And what's wrong?
No, man, the way you're describing him, I'm just like, no, fuck what I was saying. He's got to be the best villain.
He's the best villain.
He's so good.
And by the way,
he's such a great villain in this movie.
He's a fantastic villain, because if you watch the first 3 movies, you see, okay, like Caesar, these 2 great rules, and you see how they're tested. But
and all the movies also have really good villains, because it's like you got Koba and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which is like really hard to compete with, and he's kind of the biggest reason why that movie kind of reinvents the series. And Koba's like, his character has felt the presence throughout the first 3 movies.
Sure.
But I really do think, as you're describing it, by this movie, it's like, I think Proximus really encompasses a lot of the villainous aspects and the directions that we are trying to get to in terms of the apes becoming their own worst enemy here.
He is. I really love it, man. And I love his it's hard to talk about him without spoilers, but with my short description, just how like just comparing Proximus to the original Caesar, and how we've seen dictators like this in the past, where they have used religion or just
they've
ideologies.
they've recontextualized things to fit their own agenda, and then they push that on to the population that they're ruling over, and then they follow and do whatever they want.
And like the first law, well, no, the second law really, apes together stronger.
Apes together strong.
He believes in that, but because there are multiple ape factions that are just split apart, different clans, they've all developed their own individual culture. And so his vision for apes together stronger is to essentially kidnap.
It's forcible.
It's forced.
And
right?
Yeah, that's what's so interesting about like his principles and his tenets that he's preaching, is that you do believe that he believes that apes need to remain unified in order to be retaining their position as the new dominant species on Earth.
Right.
But the way and methods in which he's going about it are stripping other ape clans of their autonomy.
Yeah.
And it just yields animosity towards him as a ruler.
Yeah.
So should we dive into some spoilers here?
I think so. And by the way, I feel like we are just sort of only talking about half of Proximus.
Yeah.
So just go see this movie.
Go see. Look, it helps if you've seen the reboot series or really any of these movies in general, but I highly advise going and checking this movie out. It's a great adventure drama, amazing special effects. The CGI is incredible in this movie. The performances are great. The cinematography and the world building are incredible. Yeah. Even the production design looks just gorgeous. It's a really memorable time at the movies, and I think that you'll be talking about it, I think.
And I will say, I know that we just talked about how there are 10 movies total. For the reboots, there's now only 4. And so
they're all on Hulu right now.
They're all on Hulu.
Currently.
You might think that the barrier to entry for this reboot franchise is very high at this point. But I think you can enjoy Kingdom on its own.
And more than anything, it will just you'll probably enjoy it, and if you do, it'll influence you to just want to go and watch the other movies, which will only enhance your enjoyment of this one. So, going into spoilers. So, let's talk about Nova here.
Okay. We disagreed on this.
A little bit, yeah. I like the character. I like the inclusion of the character. I just was surprised by how the character was used. And I've given it a day to think about it, and I've come around a little bit more. I like the dichotomy that it shows in the movie. I really do. But I wanna hear your thoughts fully on Nova in this movie.
Yeah, I think that this is a girl whose family has been just wiped out. She really has.
She's human.
She's human. Exactly. We should
specify.
say this is the human that is helping Noah.
Because in the story, the humans are basically almost extinct at this point.
And there's very few humans who have not succumbed to the simian virus.
They're all feral now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Supposedly, until we meet characters like Nova or William H. Macy.
Oh wow,
who's just kind of in this movie.
Man, I was definitely not expecting.
I was shocking. I was shocked by that. I was just like, wait. I literally leaned over to you in the theater, and I was like, is that William H. Macy?
Yeah.
And that's pretty much all he was.
You know what? I don't even remember you reaching over to speak to me because I was just so.
You were just like,
damn,
what the fuck?
That's shocking. And like, yeah, this movie reveals that well that there are still humans that can talk.
I did like that though. Like as little of a role as William H. Macy has in this movie, like the impact of what his character is supposed to represent in terms of humans' existence in this world now it's good. It's solid.
Yeah. Wow,
he's just kind of preserving the history of humanity and teaching it to Proximus so that he can spin his own narrative on it.
Well, right, and that's another interesting thing about Proximus. And I was also thinking about this too with Noah, how like Noah and Proximus are very curious in their own ways, right? Just like Noah has an eye for technology. We see him fix his mother's stand for drying fish. Yeah. He fixes the taser. And even the scene where he looks at the telescope and just looks through it. And then he goes and talks to, Raka about that thing eats light. Which, I mean...
That might be my favorite scene in the movie, too, where he discovers the telescope in the old observatory.
Yeah.
And... it's just really slow, and you see him peering into the eyepiece.
Exactly.
And then Nova comes up behind him and does the same thing.
Yeah.
One thing I also do want to mention, too, is I love how nuanced, like, the locations are, too. Did you notice that moment when they're going over the ridge, and you can just see it's LAX?
Yeah.
In the background.
The airplanes,
yes.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, that's LAX. This is 300 years in the future after human civilization has broken down, and now it's just completely covered in trees and shrubs.
Absolutely.
And I'm just like, this is cool. This is what I'm talking about when I'm like, the world building and the production design is so good, but it's very contained to the background too. You have to like notice these things every now and then, and that's not the last time it happens in the movie either.
This movie has a lot to offer visually.
It's so good.
Even the scene,
you can't look away from this movie.
There was not a second where I looked away from this movie.
No, it's beautiful.
Even the scene where they see the zebra at the little pond, the CGI is incredible.
It looks really good.
This movie takes its time with everything. Its cinematography, the storytelling. Yeah. But anyway, what spoilers were we talking about?
I don't know. We were talking about Nova. We were talking about,
just how... Okay, let's get back to Nova because I sidetracked your original point.
Who has like 3 names in this movie for whatever reason.
Her real name is May.
But they first start calling her Echo.
So I think that Noah's tribe just calls humans echoes.
Yeah.
And
then eventually he meets Raka, and Raka's like, makes the best joke in the movie. When he's just like, we'll call her Nova. We call all humans Nova. We don't know why. I'm like, that's good.
Raka
was
good. Definitely a great character. Like
the levity that Raka provides, but the wisdom at the same time is so perfect. He's just like a much more vocal version of Maurice from the first 3 movies.
He kind of reminds me of Obi-Wan Kenobi in a way.
He kind of is.
Except for,
it's very wise.
Being a Jedi.
Except for that. He could have been.
That would have
if this was in
this movie.
I know, if this was in the Star Wars universe, I guarantee you Raka would have been a Jedi.
Raka absolutely.
They'll be
like
describing
Yoda
him.
Almost. He kind of gives you Yoda vibes.
He does give me Yoda back.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yoda back.
Yoda
vibes.
Yoda
back, bro.
Yoda back. We're keeping that too, by the way.
All right.
Because we're So okay, we really detracted from the Nova point.
This is why I'm saying Nova's not interesting. I'm just kidding.
I think that you're talking about in the 3rd act. I think this is where we detract, where Nova begins to do some questionable things.
I might have to rewatch it to fully absorb that, because I'm not fully on board with the way that they end Nova's character arc.
So what did you find wrong with that?
I don't know. I just don't understand why it seems like Nova just kind of straight up turns on Noah in the 3rd act for her own selfish ambitions. And I get it. Thematically, I get it. But it's like really reinforced in the last few minutes of the movie, where she's just like concealing this gun right behind her as she has a final conversation with Noah, and that she was about to just cap his ass. And I'm like, I don't know if this fits that character's arc right now. I get that they were kind of in it for themselves most of the time, but I don't know how I'm bored with that. I'm gonna probably see the movie again at some point soon, because I thought it was so good. But I don't know. I like Nova. I like the character. I like the inclusion of the character, and I think the character does a lot for the movie. And I wouldn't necessarily say that this movie works without that character, because she provides a lot of insight for Noah's journey. Yeah. But I don't know. There's just components of the 3rd act that didn't fully land for me in terms of her character. But how do you fully feel?
So I would agree that I wouldn't necessarily call it selfish what she did, right? Because we see her turn against humans, a human, and the apes in the 3rd act in order to complete her mission, which is trying to find this, computer chip for whatever reason.
Yeah, so I guess other humans can communicate with surviving humans across the globe and seemingly get in touch with George Taylor.
Exactly. Oh wow. Well, I mean, hey, if that happens, damn. But
I mean, there's that image of the astronaut at the end of the movie, and it's
No, they have a lot of great callbacks in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But
the doll is so good.
What I think about Nova's arc in the third act of the movie is that this is a person in a post-apocalyptic world who sees a chance of hope, and she's going to do whatever it takes to realize that vision.
Yeah.
And she kills Trevathan, a human.
Oh, William H. Macy.
Yeah, William H. Macy. She kills William.
Glad you remember his name.
Yeah. Well, he's only in 3 scenes. Really.
He's literally only in 3 scenes.
And he's murdered in 1. So
he's like in the movie for like maybe 15 to 20 minutes.
Probably.
In terms of the total runtime. Like he's
checked though.
His true that.
No, and so she does betray them at the end when she actually blows up the dam that is protecting the kingdom from the ocean.
Yep.
But and sure, also her friends that just helped her get into the bunker for her to complete her mission. She puts their lives in danger, but it was all too. She just doesn't strike me as a person who was never a part of like she always had her mission on the mind. And did she use Noah and his friends for her own gain? Absolutely. But I do think that it completes her arc. I do think that
you're probably right.
I think it's within the realm. Like it didn't confuse me why she blew up the dam.
You're probably right. I guess I was just my expectations. I was expecting a much different character arc for Nova because from the movies that I've seen that include her character, which are only like 2, 2.5 maybe.
Yeah.
It's very different from what I've seen from her character in the inclusion of it. She's usually very much allied with the apes, and to any major fans out there and loyalists to the full franchise, I haven't seen like 4 of these movies, so I don't know what her character does in those movies.
I think
so. I could be wrong about like what my expectations are telling me.
Right.
But in terms of this movie, it was surprising and different. I don't hate it for that reason. It was just unexpected, but I think I would definitely, like with your point of view, I think I would like it a little bit more on a rewatch. It just was not what I was expecting for her character.
No, yeah, she kills. She's not completely pro-human, right? Because she kills William H. Macy's character because he's so in line with the apes.
But she seems she's very anti-ape. It seems like
she's distrusting.
She's so distrusting. But I think that's what creates the greatest conflict though between the apes and the humans is that almost every single one of every single one of these movies has that commentary in terms of the adversarial nature between apes and humans.
Yeah.
And for a movie that feels like an apes movie that feels like it has the least to do with humans, but at the same time everything to do with them still, because that's the point. Including her character to really showcase that dichotomy was a very smart choice, and I still think they do it very well.
So at the very end, Noah asks Nova May if humans and apes can live together in peace, and she says that she doesn't know. She doesn't know. And I think that's just reality.
It is. It's not that simple. It's not a simple yes or no question.
Because we even see when Noah and his friends are in the bunker and they're looking at the children's book, the ABCs, and they see a gorilla and
a monkey that are just caged,
showcasing
what the history was.
Exactly, which they didn't know. They didn't know that humans and apes. Well, they didn't know that humans were actually intelligent.
And that there is this like superiority complex in terms of that. But like what is seen now as a superiority or an inferiority complex was normal then.
Yeah.
And that's something that the apes still had to reconcile with.
Yeah.
And they feel the same way now in terms of humans, like in terms of superiority or inferiority. And that moment that's really great too is the first moment when Nova speaks. And Raka just literally jots his jaw because he is so certain that like humans are nowhere near intelligent enough to speak because they are so far down on the evolutionary chain,
lower than boars.
Lower than wild boars that
exactly. Noah talks about,
which is also a really good, continuation of the conversation that was started in the original 1968 Planet of the Apes movie. And this movie just does almost everything right, really, in terms of telling a really good Planet of the Apes movie.
I was telling you yesterday that it might be my favorite movie of the year so far, even over Dune 2.
That's honestly, I get it. It's a really great choice.
I love this movie.
It's up there on my list, and I can see it persisting throughout the rest of the year. This is definitely going to be one of the best blockbusters of the year. So, in terms of movies, the big movies that people are going to be really talking about this year, you're probably going to hear about this over the next couple of weeks. Go see it. Go see it. It's really, really, really good. Great, even.
Really quickly, should we talk about some of the biblical points in this movie? Because I listed a few.
I would like to hear them.
All right. And by the way, as reference, I was raised Baptist. That's why I feel like I've noticed some of these
He's going to catch on to these. I was raised very agnostic, so
count your blessings.
Well,
and that's something the Baptist will say.
Anything you say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first one is that the main character's named Noah.
Yeah.
Right. That's the first.
Like, even if you're not well versed in and like
Noah's Ark for sure,
biblical teachings or whatever, that's something to catch on to pretty quickly.
And I
literally, there's like a pretty ham-fisted motif by the end of the movie where it's just a huge flood that happens. So
right, absolutely. And what I liked about, I even talked about this last night, how like when they eventually go to Proximus's kingdom, that the castle that Proximus has is actually a huge boat. It's a cruiser. And it just reminds me of Noah's Ark.
I mean, he was living. I mean, his kingdom essentially was all in like this wasteland of broken down ships.
Yeah,
and it was really cool. Production design is so goddamn good in this movie. It looks incredible.
You talked about this last night. How it also reminds you of Moses,
yeah.
Right? Just how like he's
just leading this like large group of apes, and I think you could probably apply that to Caesar in a lot of ways too. I think there's a pretty like there's different versions in which you can view Caesar as like a Jesus-like figure or a Messiah, but at the same time he's very Moses-like too in terms of trying to lead his apes out of this world of apprehension and into a promised land for them to prosper.
And eventually uses the flood to escape with his clan.
Yeah, right? And that's how it perfectly just weaves its way into Noah's Ark.
Oh, we're definitely keeping that in. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's that kind of podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep, watch out.
Right. Just two more. This is probably a bit of a reach, but Noah is from the Eagle clan. And because we're in spoilers, I'll say this. At the end, he, just throughout the movie, he depends on his father's eagle, and just in different points of the movie. And it just reminds me of in a part of Noah's Ark in the Bible, how he uses a dove in order to find land.
Interesting.
So just like that dependence on a bird, I thought that was pretty interesting.
That's one of my favorite scenes in the movie too. I like it. Like I mentioned the telescope scene, which is fantastic, but I think actually my favorite scene is just when he sees his father's eagle son again, when he's trapped in the kingdom, essentially, and he's just having a heart-to-heart with that eagle, and he was just like, he fully comes to terms with the fact that Proximus Caesar's teachings are wrong. He's got the right idea, but his methods are so wrong. The law is wrong. And then he finally is able to have sun latch onto him, and he just stands over the horizon. It's a beautiful shot, and this movie's so good.
Right? Final biblical influence. The protagonist is fighting a Caesar, like Jesus.
Good job.
Yes.
Good job.
If anyone, if a better Christian has seen this movie, please let us know if we missed any biblical influences in this movie.
Yes, this is a very, very Christian podcast, so tune in.
Thank God.
Thanks, Caesar.
Thank you, Caesar.
Thanks, Proximus Caesar.
Oh, yeah.
No, don't follow his teachings.
No.
He's a tyrant.
Yes, he is.
So, in conclusion, what a movie. What an incredible movie.
See the movie, man.
Go see Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Embrace it. This is the Loose Leaf Media Podcast. Signing off. My name is Davis Leaf. We'll see you next week for next week's episode.
Bye, everybody.
See you later.